Welcome back. Now it's time to work on the dining table, basically the dining set of our house here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and in this little area that we see right here, I'm going to place a dining table with some dining chairs there just to add some detail stuff right there. Okay, so this is going to span a few videos here, and let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is pull up some reference of a dining table set. What I'm going to do is open up an image file, and again, extremely important, actually you can't work without doing this, going online and finding some reference images of what you're going to be doing. So I've collected a few reference images as you can see here, and I'm going to choose to go with this interesting dining set that I found online. And what attracted me to this, I'm going to maximize that. What attracted me to this is that I like the black glossy look of this dining room furniture. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and build something based off of this. It doesn't have to be exactly what's in the picture, but this is going to help us to pretty much guide us during our modeling work to create our table and our chairs. So we got to create this dining table, and we need to create these chairs over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First things first, measurements are really important. We can't model this unless we have some measurements. Unfortunately, we can't get exact measurements from the picture, so we pretty much have to come up with our own measurements. So by basic human common sense and logic, I took some measuring tape in real life and looked at some measurements of different dining tables and chairs and things like that, and I came up with some pretty common measurements which I thought were going to be okay and work out pretty good for this project here. Alright, so you might want to get some measuring tape and measure out some basic measurements there for your table. These are the measurements that I'm going to use. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to create this from a box. So I'm going to build a box here roughly. I'm going to come in here and make some changes to the parameters for the length, the width, and height, which is going to be the thickness. So for the length, based on what I said, using just common sense and some logic and measuring tape, I came up with this measurement for my table. The length I'm going to make about 6.5 feet, so 6 feet 6 inches. The width I'm going to make 3 feet, and the thickness here, obviously we can't have a table that's 2 feet thick. What I'm going to go for the thickness here is about 2 inches. 2 inches is pretty thick. You can go with less, 1.5 inches if you want to, but I'm going to go with 2 inches. Okay, so here's the basic geometry for my table. I'm going to move it over here inside of my dining room area over here. I'm going to rotate it this way 90 degrees. Alright, so the length is here, kind of like with that rectangular area right there. Okay, now if I come in real close, I can see that the pivot point is placed on the bottom side of the surface of the table, which is good, because now if I open up the transform typing tool, I can place this at the height that I need it. Now again, based on measurements I took with measuring tape and using some common sense, I came up with a height here for the table of about 2 feet 9 inches. So I'm going to go with 2.5 feet. Oops. 2.5 feet there. I'm going to go with 2 feet 9 inches. So it's going to be about 2 feet 9 inches off of the ground, off the floor. Okay, so here's my table. Alright, pretty good. Next thing I want to do is convert this to an editable poly so I can start editing this guy. I'm going to go to polygon mode, turn on ignore back facing there, and I'm going to select this polygon. And let me go back to the image to show you what I'm going to do. If I zoom in here to this table object, you notice something here. The legs aren't traditional legs like what the chairs have, you know, a leg on each corner over here. Instead, it's kind of this base that the top of the table sits on top of. And the base is formed up of two parts. If I zoom in here and you look very carefully, you can see how the base is, kind of this U shape. It goes up, across, and then back down. But within that base is another mini base, a smaller base. Basically, it's the same object, but a scaled down version, you can kind of see it there. It's a little bit difficult to see. But if you concentrate and you look at this image very carefully and study it, you can see that there's a little base that goes up, across, and then back down. So it's basically a big base and then a small base below it. Okay? At least that's from what I can tell. And again, the reference image is just there as reference. It's not an instructional guide to tell us exactly how this thing is going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to 3ds Max. I'm going to use the scale tool. I'm going to hold down shift and scale this down a bit like so to create basically the large base. And I'm going to leave it as an element. So I'm going to clone to an element so it's still part of the mesh. It's just that it's physically separated. Okay. Now with this done, I'm going to go to my quad menu. I'm going to go to the extrude tool options. I'm going to extrude this by group. And extrusion height, 10 inches is too much. I'm going to go with something like 4 inches and hit OK. Then I'm going to select the polygons that are at the ends. And I'm going to go back to my extrude options and 4 inches again and hit OK. Then I'm going to select that polygon, the ends. And I'm just going to extrude that out. And you can extrude quickly just by selecting a polygon, hitting Shift and E on the keyboard. And what I'm going to do is open up the Transform Type In tool. And when I use the Move tool, you can see that I can't use this. That's because of my selection mode. I'm using the Pivot Center mode. I'm going to come up here and switch to Selection Center. Okay. And now I can go ahead and take the Z-axis here and place it at 0. And both of those polygons will be aligned with the floor. Alright, pretty good. And I don't need those polygons anymore, so I'm just going to delete them, get rid of them. Okay. And then up here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Target Weld and Vertex mode, and I'm going to target weld these vertices you see right here. Basically to those corners, to create myself a better topology there for the corner, or the corners of this table. So I'm going to do that. Another thing I'm going to do just so I can work a little bit easier here, I'm going to select the table and the house geometry and go to Isolate Selection. Alt-Q to do that quickly, just so I can work a little bit easier and more comfortable. Okay, so here's this part here. Alright, if I go back to the image and we look at this, especially at the bottom, you can see that the sides of this base bulge out a little bit. You can see how they bulge out very softly. It's a very subtle effect, but they do bulge out. So to mimic that bulging out, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Edge mode. I'm going to select this edge here, and I'll select the edge on the back side there as well. I'm going to select the ring, and with the ring selected on the front and back of this table, I'm going to go to the Connect Tool options, and I'm going to connect this maybe about, let's see, 4 times. Looks pretty good, and I'll hit OK. I'm going to go to Polygon mode, and what I'll do is I'll go to Modify Selection and Graphite Modeling Tools, and I'm going to select this little button here. When you hover over it, you should get a tooltip that calls it Loop Mode. It's got a little lightning bolt icon right there. I'll select that, and you should see up here in the top right of the viewport, it should say Loop Mode On. Okay? And what I'll do is I'll select this polygon here, Control and select that polygon. Then I'm going to Control select this polygon, Control select that polygon, and I should have both of the loops selected there for the front and back. Alright? Now what I'll do is I'll hit Grow to grow the selection. Oops. I want to make sure I take loop mode off when I do that, or else when I grow selection it selects everything. That's not what I want to do. So I'll go back to Modify Selection here in the Graphite Modeling Tools and turn loop mode off. And you can see that it's no longer on. It's gone. So now I'll hit Grow, and there we go. Those are polygons I want to select, those strips of polygons that I basically just created. Now I want to use the Scale tool, but you need to make sure that your selection mode is set to Selection Mode Center, which is the second option here. And now what I'll do is I'll scale this out just a little bit, not too much, just a bit, something like that. And then I'm going to hit Shrink to shrink the selection, and then I'll scale again, just a bit, something like that. Okay, so it makes a very subtle soft bulge, and if I render this, I can see the bulge right there. Now, these polygons have incorrect normals. The smoothing groups are off, so I'll fix that now. And to fix that's very easy. I'll go to Element Mode, 5 on the keyboard to do that quickly. I'll select the bottom element here, and then in my Modify tab over here, I'm going to scroll all the way down, and you should see an area here called Polygon Smoothing Groups with all these different numbers. hit auto smooth here with all those polygons selected, and it'll go ahead and fix that. Now we don't have those hard edges. We have this nice soft bulge right there, just like in the picture, which is good. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is create the bottom piece right there. Remember we said that, if I look back at the image, we said that there's a bottom piece right here that's the same as the big base, but it's a little base, kind of like a mini base right there. So I'm going to select this element that's right here, the base. I'm going to use the scale tool, and I'm just going to hold down shift and scale this to create a duplicate of this. Okay, so something like that. And I'm going to make it an element. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to hit F to go to the front view. I'm going to go to wireframe. You can see here how we have to scale this like so, and I'm going to scale in the X to pull it out like that. And there we go. Basically, you want to scale it so that the ends penetrate into the large base, the ends of the little base penetrate into the big base. Then I'm going to go to vertex mode. I'm going to turn off ignore back facing. The shortcut for ignore back facing, by the way, is hold down Control Shift and I to do that. I'm going to select all of these vertices here. Go back to perspective view here, go back to shaded mode. Alright. Open up the transform typing tool, and I'll place these vertices at 0 in the Z axis so that they're on the floor. Now, we do have some hidden polygons here. You can see we have a hidden polygon there and a hidden polygon there for the little base. We don't need those because they're not visible, so I'm going to delete them and get rid of them. And there we go. Now let's render this out, and we've got our big base and our little base. Perfect. Okay. So that's pretty much going to do it for the table. Alright, I'm going to end this video here. In the next video, we're going to get started working on the dining chair. If we look at the image, the dining chair is a lot more complex than the table. The table is pretty easy to do in comparison to the dining chair. The dining chair has some pretty unique shapes and form to it, and it's made up of several pieces or parts. So we're going to see how we can build a dining chair in the next video.